This is the ID Fanatic podcast, coming to you from beautiful Midtown Toronto in February 2022. Glad we're out of 2021 and 2020 for that matter. Hopefully, with the new Pfizer pill, this year will be different. I'm talking while there are still trucks parked in Ottawa protesting mask mandates, and I don't know what they're going to do with them, throw them all in jail or something. Anyway, today I'm recording the intro for my discussion with Conor Kostick, a fellow who works for a French company called Snatchbot. Now, a name like Snatchbot, I really thought it was an Irish company, and Conor is in Ireland, but alas, it's French. Anyway, a Snatchbot is the name of a chatbot authoring system. So in an earlier podcast, I talked to Ryan Laverty of Arist about his chatbot learning system, and it was terrific idea and design, but I wanted to do something specific that I couldn't do with that. So what I wanted to do was, we had a product that was rented out that our customer service reps, CSRs, were not really well versed in. And so it was hard for them to make sure that they had determined the customer's needs properly so things could go out. So he wanted something like a job aid to help them in this. So a group of us were talking about it, and it seemed like a list of questions to ask. So we assigned that to a subject matter expert on the team. The questions were roundly applauded by the group, but I thought there was a little thin, so I talked to him about it to try and extract it into a decision tree, because I didn't really know the path of the questions or what depended on what. And I thought it would be cool if we could automate this decision tree. And it worked, but when I brought it back to the group, they thought it was cool, but the diagnostic process really didn't go far enough. There were too many variables to be handled, so we abandoned that. And then the next application I had was forklift training, because it was a classroom session followed by a practical session where they got to use the truck. And then a week later, someone would come in and test them. They get a certificate. So during the week in between, they were supposed to practice, but there was nothing really to remind them of or reinforce the training. And at the end of the training, there had been this 30-question multiple choice test that they were sort of guided through. And it wasn't, and there were calculations in there. So I thought maybe I can have the chatbot, because with the chatbot, you can send things out. You can send texts out to their phones at certain times. So I thought maybe I can send out a little quiz twice a day, and each time just send out 2 questions. So, hello, how are you? Here are your 2 questions, 1, 2. They answer them, they get feedback. And I thought, well, that's good for reinforcement, but let me make it a little more interesting for them and gamify it. So I wanted to incorporate how fast they answered into their score, and then give them a score, give them a cumulative score that at the end of the week they could get gold, silver, or bronze. The Olympics are on right now, so I'm thinking of that. And then the third thing was we have some leadership training, one-on-one coaching, 3 sessions taking place a month apart. So again, I thought, well, let me throw some texts at them, 2 a week or something during this period. But then I thought, I know that in the one-on-one coaching, these people have to develop action plans of how because they're personalized, and the action plans are how they're going to improve. So let's wait till they do their action plan, and then let's use that for the chatbot content. So it's going to be basically reminding them to do the things in their action plan. Have you done this yet? When are you going to do it? Set a date. Maybe I can capture the date and remind them on the date. Things like that. So that kind of flexibility really opens up a world of possibilities for not just training reinforcement, but suspending the training effort over time. So anyway, I think that's an incredible new thing that we can do. And there are a number of tools that are beyond classroom and beyond e-learning and beyond authoring systems, but which also are part of the instructional toolbox, because you should be open to all these different avenues and think about how they can support each other. Anyway, enough about that. I'm going to talk to Conor about Snatchbot and chatbots and learning in general. And we're going to start right now. So I hope you enjoy it.
Hi, Mitch.
Yeah. Scared me.
Sorry.
Your voice went a little tinny a second ago. I hope.
Okay, how's that? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's better.
Good.
How you doing?
Oh, not bad. I have one of my children has COVID, so we're all having to isolate. Very boring.
Wow. Yeah, we remarkably have gone through the whole thing without any of us getting it. It's really, I mean, my kids have been out and about and breaking the rules here and there.
Yeah. Well, my Owen's only 10. He got it from school. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, that seems to be what's happening. The Canadian Prime Minister has it right now, or because his kid got it in school. Fortunately,
for the kids, it's pretty mild. He only had like one bad day of flu, and then.
Yeah, well, you never know though. It's the big question mark over exactly what impact it's going to have, and it's more serious for some people, and then for some people it drags on and on, or they get all sorts of different kinds of things happening. It's scary stuff, whichever way you slice it. But you've been in the chatbot world for a while, and you have a newsletter. The chatbot is a newsletter, right?
Yeah, well, yeah,
blog.
Magazine. Yeah.
Blog. Yeah. You can tell I'm from the 20th century.
Yeah, so that's going quite well. I'm always getting requests from people can they put their features on it? So that's a good sign. They want to put a bit of product placement in which I don't mind, as long as they're not just it's not just PR, that they actually do have something interesting to say.
So how did you get into this in the first place? Is you got a computer science background?
Not in the slightest. It's quite a unusual path, I think. I'm a science fiction writer.
Oh yeah, I was just seeing you had a novel called Epic.
That's it, yeah, modestly called Epic.
With skateboarders.
And, that's the sequel, Saga.
Okay.
Epic is about a virtual world where everybody's playing an online game called Epic, a fantasy game. And they're doing that because their income and their social position depends on how well their characters are doing. And there's an AI in the story. The game itself is sentience. So, and I'd gone on Upwork as a freelance writer, and I'd done the creative writing test, and I come number 1 out of 17,000 odd people who'd done that test. So it meant I got some quite good, interesting clients, and one of them was Snatchbot. And Snatchbot was its founders are French, and they had a nice product, but they had a terrible website. I mean, they didn't have English as a first language, and the instructions on how to use the bots, writing software instructions, as you know, this is your expertise, is often not done by good writers. It's often done by good software engineers, and it's quite hard to understand. So let alone if you're trying to write in French and then translate it into English, it's difficult. So they wanted someone like me who would convert all their material into good English, really good, clear. So if you're looking at the instructional documents, chances are I wrote those. And but in order to write really clear instructions, I obviously had to master the art of bot building myself, so that I knew exactly what I was trying to explain. And so my role grew and grew and grew. They really liked the work. The Snatchbot started to race up the Google search rankings for various topics that I was covering. And so eventually they invited me to be the CMO, even though I have no computing background.
Great. So they were around for a while. How long have they been around then?
Founded in 2015.
Which
is not that long, really, but for startups
like
and software,
long in the tooth for. I mean, there's new things every day, but I found, now I have some computer background, not a lot. I'm also a writer, but I did take a first year computer science course. I had to learn Python, and many years before that, I learned BASIC, and then I've got a friend who does it, so I sort of keep tabs on. So I knew about things coming up. So for someone like me, it was pretty easy to get in there because I understood basically how it was going to work before I got in there, and then it was just a matter of how easy is it to figure out. And I still had a problem actually with the variables, getting a number, getting a calculation done, and then get the number to display.
Yeah, but they're quite sensitive. A bracket out of place and it all fails. So yeah.
But overall, it was pretty straightforward for, at least for someone with a little bit of programming background.
Yeah.
And now, in terms of use cases, I was looking for something. So I previously had an interview with Ryan Laverty at Arist, who is using a chatbot, but he's developed an instructional sort of straitjacket for it a little bit to help people write good educational materials so that they're not just going all over the place. But I need a little more freedom than that. So I was looking beyond that. I found something called our Mobile Coach first. Mobile Coach was interesting. The programming is kind of done in the spreadsheet, right?
I've seen those kind. Yeah.
So you put your variables and your if-then statements and everything right in there. And it's the first time that I really understood what a chatbot was, which is really an interactive database.
Yeah.
So you're talking to a database and it's searching for things and spitting them up to you.
What I didn't see when with the one that I was exploring was I didn't see any NLP in that kind of creative process. Did your one have that?
Yeah, it did.
An ability to pass a sentence.
Yeah, I think it could. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it did. And then when I came over to Chatbot, I didn't have to go into the spreadsheet. I was just sort of outside of that within the Chatbot sort of interface, so that made it easier. But I was just reading in your LinkedIn, you go on a little bit about NLP, and that is really, for listeners, when people talk about chatbots using AI or a lot of other things online that say, oh, we're AI powered stuff, usually all they're talking about is natural language processing, which is like Siri or Alexa, the ability to understand what people say or take what people say and parse it into a reasonable understanding of it and then respond to it. So if you've done you talk about it a little bit in there, so I want to get talking about it here because it really is the biggest AI success story to date, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and it's amazing actually. It's coming on in leaps and bounds. I mean, I've been interested in AI from a sort of philosophical point of view, and what we're talking about here is nothing like the films where you have sentient robots who are usually bad, and dangerous. But we're absolutely miles away from a genuine artificial intelligence in the sort of Turing test kind of a way. But what has come on amazingly well is software's ability to hear a human talk and understand what the intention of the human is. I mean, that has come on an awful lot. The input is text, but that doesn't mean it can't be voice, because it's quite easy to translate voices into text now. And a lot of use cases want that. I mean, the forward-looking people looking at these self-driving cars where the person's in the car and they're sort of talking to Alexa, I want them to go here, this kind of music on, or this audio book or podcast. Apparently there's been an upsurge in podcast purchasing by the big aggregate platforms, because they're getting ready for this content that these drivers who are sort of half asleep because their AI is driving them want. So yeah, so we have this NLP engine that will pass the inputs, and it's our own. You know, not everybody in the Snatchbot sphere builds their own. Quite often they leverage the giants, which makes sense for a certain scale of activity, because the giants have got really good NLP engines, you know. But what we found is there's a lot of clients more around the banking and medicine than you know, instruction end, who are quite anxious their data doesn't flow through the NLP engines of the big giants. They want to sign a data contract that's very secure. So they prefer to work with us. And ours is good, you know. I mean, it does take a lot of training to get human-like accuracy, but it's pretty good.
No, that's interesting. It brings up the privacy issues.
Yeah.
As we move further into the convenience age, it seems like a big trade-off of convenience for privacy and, you know, possible data breaches all over the place. For instance, the convenience of using AI to, you know, personalize learning, to have a specific learning path for each person. So that means you have to track that person's activity through, you know, through the apps that they're using or through whatever, so that you can have a database, build a database on which to make your judgments. But that means they're giving up all that privacy in case, you know, anyone ever wants to get at it.
But not only that, I think some companies set up their terms of trading in a way that allows them to leverage that information. So you wouldn't, right, Mitch, but a more nefarious educationalist might be giving away their educational product for free because the small print says we're allowed to pass this on to advertisers, because, you know, it's quite valuable being able to target the right people for your adverts. So not only is the data breach to worry about, there is the terms. I think privacy is a very serious issue. So, you know, I'm quite keen on GDPR, which a lot of users are. You know, over in Europe, we have this quite strict regime of data protection where users can, they have to be able to have a point of contact with the company to be able to get their data removed if they want. And I think the whole world should follow this. I mean, it's a bit of a pain for business. There's a lot more paperwork, but it does force businesses to put these procedures in place. And as a user, using my, you know, user's hat rather than my CMO hat, I think this is good. This is a, you know, it's.
You say GDPR?
That we, what general
documentation, data protection
regulation.
Oh, wasn't familiar with that term.
It's very strict in Europe. I mean, you get big fines if you're not compliant with it, and it's basically it's a regulation that means anybody can contact you and say, please remove my data from your system, and you have to respond to that. You have to have a GDPR officer.
That's like the no-call list. For robocalls. You were supposed to be able to call in and take your name off their list. That never quite worked, though, I think.
Yeah.
So maybe if you tell us a little bit about some learning cases with Snatchbot, how it's being used in training, I guess, corporate training.
Well, I think one of the very, very first people to get in touch with us when I started was an Indian company where they were giving maths courses to their students, and quite rightly they thought, well, this could be automated, you know, and there were some advantages to the learner here. of dealing with a bot rather than a human, in that they can take a test and they can get instant grades. But it wasn't just administering the test. He wanted to actually teach, to show how he had a particular way of doing multiplication. It wasn't a usual way, but obviously it worked well. Can't remember the name. Vedic maths. So it's a particular style of maths. And the bot was designed to teach his students that. And as far as I know, it's still going. So this was 2017, I think. So that's and that's a natural enough use case, because maths is a very it's very kind of, it runs down very clear tracks, unlike, say, a humanities topic, where you kind of have to chew around a bit of philosophy or a bit of historical interpretation. Figuring out the factors of a large numeral it has a set kind of answer, and so it lent itself quite easily as a good use case at the beginning.
It's hard.
I think bots teaching humanities now, by the way, but
I was thinking,
go
with
ahead,
teaching math, though, don't you want to see, they say show your work, so that the teacher can go through and see where you went wrong and things like that. I wouldn't think that a chatbot was able to do that.
Well, if you put the link up to the one I've got on, what does it teach? It teaches logarithms, right? You're right in a sense. Okay, so even a subject like maths, or say even perhaps more maths than the humanities, there has to be a kind of eureka moment where we, the learner, it suddenly falls into place. Right? Okay, I get it. This is what's happening. How do you measure that get-itness? I'm not sure, but one way is simply to crunch the number of, to give the student a lot of questions and then see, right, okay, so look, they're only getting 60% of these. I think there are ways to see where they're going wrong if you design the questions in a smart way. Like you could, designing the questions, you could know that that symmetry doesn't work in the maths equation. So you could have like 4 or 5 that are symmetrical and the student thinks they've got the hang of it, but then you do the unsymmetrical one, and if they stick to a inferior method, they get it wrong. So you could design it in ways that trigger indications as to what's going on.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. One way I was thinking of using one that I wasn't able to do, that I needed Snatchbot for, was I'm working at a company now that rents film equipment, and so there's a warehouse where they keep all this cables and stuff, and so a lot of people have to learn how to ride a lift truck or a forklift,
right,
to get the cable, storing the cables in big towers and things like that. So they do the lift truck training one week, and then the next week they come by for testing, and during the week you're supposed to get practice. So I wanted to have something where I could send them a couple of questions a day, or a couple of questions in the morning, a couple of questions at night, from the training material, just to remind them of what they'd learned and increase the retention between the time that they got the training and the time they have the test. So I find it was really useful for that.
Yeah, and that brings it to a different level of the conversation. So it's not really about, I don't think the value of chatbots is so much in the content, because nowadays I think a chatbot could deliver any kind of a content, videos, any topic. I think what you are doing fits best pedagogical practice in terms of active learning. Like if you do any kind of a course in pedagogy, they will say active learning is far more important than passive learning. And what do I mean by that? Passive learning is when someone gives a lecture.
Yeah.
And you're just sat there, maybe taking notes, maybe not, but you might not even be there. You know, you might be on your Zoom nowadays, but secretly off making coffee or whatever students do, right? It's a very passive one-way process. Active learning is a dialogue, and it goes back to Socrates and Plato, you know, and the conversations. I don't know if you read Socrates' conversations. They always annoyed me because he very much leads them, you know, but still, it's an interaction, you know, it's and it's so different. Now, a chatbot comes a lot closer to a more active learning experience because it's asking for a response. So, you know, you could send out videos. I've seen onboarding programs by HR teams where they just show you the videos and then send you to the policy, and then you have to click that you've read it. But whether you've actually read it, they don't really drill down into that. But a chatbot can, because it can say, you know, I'd just like to ask you a few questions, and it can kind of pop you up a little bit and say, okay, well, to be honest, I did skim, you know, I'm being honest with myself now. So now I'm going to figure out what the answer is to that question.
Well, you could do that with regular web-based training. But with the innovation of the chatbot is you can spread it out. You can, you know, spread it over a few days, and you can get them, you know, at odd times and things like that.
Yeah, and on their WhatsApp when they're on the train or, you know, whatever. It's got that flexibility as well.
So from an instructional design perspective, it becomes for me a new sort of what's the word? Which, you know, there's sight, there's hearing. They're called not media.
Tool.
Media.
Yeah.
Not a new sense, but a new modality. There you go. That's the word I was looking for. Because you have videos which are passive. You have e-learning, which should be interactive. It isn't often enough, but it ideally, you know, you have the interactivity, but it's for things where you want to have a bit of linearity in that you've got, you know, some chapters to go through, whatever material to get through. You've got classroom training, which is, you know, allows the human interaction, allows for role playing and things like that, which you can approximate with e-learning, but it's not quite the same as being, you know, face to face. And then this becomes another thing in that it has the time element. So all those things are kind of concentrated. And this one, you can send out a couple of messages a week or one a day, and you can help with things like retention and things like making the knowledge part of your life. You integrate them into activities that they're doing as part of the job. You know, it's a very lot of flexibility once you start thinking about it. And one of the other thing that I wanted to do that you guys helped me out with, I wanted to give a test that was timed. So I don't actually think we never got to the end of this yet. I wanted to give questions and have, instead of just saying, oh, you got it right, you got it wrong, I wanted it to be time limited, and I wanted you to get a better mark if you answered it faster, as well as whether it was right or wrong. So the two elements in there. I'm not sure we quite got there, but that kind of fooling around is possible.
Yeah, well, thanks to your prompting. I've wanted it for some time, actually. I just haven't got round to actually pushing the tech people to do it. So yeah, we did it when you prompted it, because a lot of people want this kind of timing effect. Also, even in a non-educational context, there are a lot of use cases where when the conversation falls silent for a certain length of time, we had 30 seconds before the conversation moved on. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times you don't want to wait 30 seconds to say, you know, is there something wrong or whatever. So it was a useful tool. So we're glad to have it. So we've gone all the way down to 1 second now. With regard to scoring how quickly, I think that it can be done, but at the moment there isn't an off the shelf within Snatchbot. I think what I would do is ping a clock, you know, some sort of world clock, and ping it again when I got the answer, and then I would record that on the spreadsheet. The you know, but you could record how long the question took. I think in that fashion.
Yeah, and there is a lot of flexibility, and it's nice to have, you know, you guys are particularly responsive about that. When I started looking into chatbots, I saw there were like a dozen or so with all sorts of names, but mostly they're for customer experience and their sales. They have a sales agenda. So and they put a premium on ease of use because they want salespeople and other people to be making them. So they end up being very limited in what they can do. And they're very targeted. I mean, they're designed to be sales funnels and to solve problems, solve objections, things like that. And they don't want people mucking around with it. So there's actually only a few on the market, to my knowledge, where you can actually do a lot of custom things.
Right, I think so too. I have to sell them, so I have an interest in exploring these metrics, and we have 11% of our sales are in the educational sector, and I think that is quite high. For I mean, that's second to IT. So, you know, I mean, they're all kind of clustered around the 10% mark. But I think that's right, that and they're not necessarily teaching bots. It's just that universities are quite quick.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned marking, and I actually have some qualms about that, the automated marking and using a chatbot as a TA. I mean, it's bad enough using a graduate student as a TA when they sort of mindlessly go through marking tests. This, to my mind, it kind of exacerbates that, but I also wonder about the privacy issues in terms of student records.
Well, I mean, the universities all retain the scores. Very often the transcripts for a couple of years if they're like finals. So I mean, the privacy issue is definitely there, but it's just in a new format. It's not. There's no less. It hasn't created a greater problem, I don't think. If you have an automated result.
Yeah, not as bad as medical records.
Yeah, and you know, chatbots are very helpful for them in medicine. I mean, we put one up really just as a help and to let governments know that we would allow our platform to be used for free by national health organizations who wanted to communicate quickly about COVID. So we did a COVID bot, which you asked it questions, and for answers, it drew on John Hopkins and the World Health Organization. And it was getting tens of millions of hits a week. You know, it was just off the scale.
Wow.
Like, yeah, it really was. Because that in the early days, I think everyone was really frightened. And you could see country by country where COVID was hitting because of the metrics on this bot, you know. And yeah, so when a bot is being useful like this, when it's being helpful, that really overtakes the. I said earlier, I'm very conscious of privacy. I'm anxious that as a user of software that I'm not giving my data away, and I want the right to be able to recall my data. I think students should have the right. I was demonstrating a chatbot right I was giving a talk to a university, and I got the students to interact with the bot. And one or two of them, as human beings do, start to mess with the bot, right? And they say things like, I love you, or something like this. What they'd forgotten was, this was all coming back through to me. So I could show them, I could share my screen and say, look, this is you talking to the bot right now. And it's like, whoa, okay, I'm going to be careful what I say to this bot now. So the student does need to know that, first of all, they're talking to the chatbot. They do need to know what's happening to that data. And they do have to have the right to have that data scrubbed. That's all absolutely valid concern. But the plus side is, like you put it very well, it's building up a profile to really tailor and target. Look, you're struggling with this. You know, these are the bits you haven't completed. This is a reminder. You might find this resource helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's pretty sophisticated.
And like the math example you gave, it's interesting because it has the flexibility. One of the big things that I've always liked about computer-based training or e-learning is the ability to branch based on user input, based on, you could find out who the user is, what their background is, and then branch based on that, or branch within a course. But it's hardly ever done. Like, I've been so disappointed in the last 30 years of doing this at how little that's really taken advantage of by instructional designers who are writing this stuff over the years. Everybody comes into the thing and they just sort of do a linear thing, or they do a little bit of branching, or it gets too complicated and they don't want to pursue it. Really, that's where the power, in my mind, is of e-learning, and chatbots maybe push that a little more. Like in the math example, if you're designing the questions to expose weaknesses, right? Then you've got to put some, you're not just, saying, oh, here's a few questions about this topic. You got 3 out of 4 right. Yay. Right. You're giving them specific questions so that you can see by the answers, you give them 10 of the same sort of question and they make the same mistake every time. You should be able to draw some conclusions on that and go towards some remediation. And I mean, you could always do that with computer-based training. It just wasn't done. But I think with chatbots, again, maybe it won't be done, right? But instructional designers have to step up to the plate and take this opportunity to do some diagnostics along with the teaching.
I think if you had, I mean, it's partly because I think it's quite a precarious world we live in for teaching, especially at third level, college level. So the system doesn't really reward a big investment up front in a course. But if you knew you were going to be at a college for 10 years, you might want to put some real attention to this, because you get it right in the first year and it's just going to be, then you can just tweak it for the rest.
Yeah.
It's a lot of upfront thought in the design.
I think the upfront investment is overestimated. I mean, it does take more time and thought to get this kind of thing happening. But I think once you figure out a way to do it, it's scalable. You can repeat it with different content.
You triggered another thought with me, which is chatbots are absolutely wonderful at overcoming silos. So supposing, right, you have someone in biology doing a chatbot course, and then someone in maths, someone in physics. Now, they've all done this. It should then be possible to have a conversation where a student logs onto a university bot, and the bot says, "What do you want to learn about?" And they say biology, and you're going down there, and then it says, "By the way, this connects to maths," and you can overcome. You can join the dots in a way that a lot of universities say we encourage multidisciplinary education, but it's very hard to actually achieve that. It's more, you end up with someone who's got like in America, it's a bit different to Ireland where I am. In America, at least, you can sort of have majors and minors, and you can sort of fit things together a bit. Here, we tend to be much more specialized. But e-learning has the potential to have the whole of the university in, as joined up. And perhaps something like that will emerge. I mean, I do notice this isn't so much a chatbot e-learning now, but I've noticed these massive online public-facing courses with a great deal of interaction, which is really interesting.
Yeah,
you might have seen these. So a lecturer might give a public-facing course. 500 people might be attending it and commenting, and then so you have the forums that get quite lively. People are discussing the content.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, no, the management of interaction on online courses is a big issue. Something also people don't take full advantage of. But it is fun to go to a seminar or something and then go to a chat table and really get a chance to meet people and interact. I actually prefer it to a live conference because in a live conference, I can sort of go in my own little corner. But when you're at a table with only 5 people and you each take turns, there's no hiding.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've exhausted a lot of interesting content. I appreciate you coming on.
We've sort of flagged where the future might lie in this area.
Yeah. No, it's nice to have, a new tool in the toolkit to work with that isn't just recreating something that already exists. It really creates a new avenue for development in terms of designing training.
Great. Well, thanks for having me.
Okay. Have a good day. Ciao.
Cheers, mate. See you.
Hi, this is Mitch Moldavsky. The ID Fanatic podcast is a monthly exploration of the leading edge of instructional design in the 21st century. I invite you to join the ID Fanatic page on LinkedIn, where you'll get podcast updates and a lot of other free resources of interest to instructional designers. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you have an awesome month. Bye.